welcome everybody. I'm going to give you a couple minutes to roll in here. Good morning to our West Coast people where I am, and happy lunchtime to people that are on the East Coast and then everybody in between. So give you a second to roll in. For people that don't know me, my name is Peg Keogh. I've been on here a few times, but my buddy, Matt Carpenter, he's got a conflict today, so I was happy to step in and talk to everybody today. So happy to see we have a bunch of people rolling in. Really appreciate you taking the time because I know how busy it is this time of year, especially for all of you. So really appreciate you taking the time, and I want to make this hugely productive and helpful for you. But first off, I am Peg Keogh. I'm the Director of Education here at CAP. So just a little bit about my background. I used to be in the financial industry, advisor, financial planner. And I had my own business exclusively doing college financial planning all around financial fit, working with families and helping them with this. And then I joined CAP a couple years ago. I was looking for a team, and it was just the right time for me to make a slight tweak, do the same work, and actually spend more time doing what I love. So that's who I am. And for people that aren't familiar with College Aid Pro, this is the coffee talk we do every other week for exclusively for school counselors. We want to basically support you, lean on us for all things around financial aid. That's really what we're here for. So I'm going to talk to you about how we can support you in a deep way a little bit later. But what this is for, the coffee talk, it's bugging me that I'm sorry, there's like a reflection in my glasses for some reason today. So sorry about that. What I want to touch on today is the CSS profile. So I'll share my screen in a little bit and we'll talk through that, because as we all know, it's live, right? It's on paper, it goes live October 1. But it always goes live early. This year it went live quite a bit early, like a couple weeks early. So it's been out for quite a while. And as we all know, for kids that are applying ED or EA, there's some deadlines looming, next week, right? November 1st. So we thought that this would be super timely, hopefully helpful. So we'll talk through that. But what this coffee talk is meant to be is a time to share things that are current, but most importantly, give you a chance to ask questions. So if you have any questions, don't be shy, pop them in the Q&A. I'm happy to address them as we're chatting here. And we have this scheduled for an hour, but we don't have to go the whole hour. I'm not planning on doing a big presentation that takes a long time. I just want to go through some stuff and just really talk about the CSS, why it's important to submit it, and just show you a few things that always cause questions for parents every year. And I just realized that I did not. So give me 1 second. I'm super sorry. I wanted to just quickly show you the flow of the CSS profile. So let me just log into my sample here. But also I want to touch on, and people might ask me questions about this as well, is the FAFSA. As we all know, the FAFSA, what we're hearing from the government is it's going live in December. Who knows? Maybe for people that have been around for a while, you'll remember that it used to go live January 1. And so who knows? Maybe they're even going to go back to old school for 1 year. We'll see. But anyways, I do want to talk about that as well, because it's just another wrinkle in all the fun stuff we do. So CSS profile. So again, in the Q&A, don't be shy, pop in questions. I'll be looking at them as I'm chatting. And I'm sure if you have questions, some of your questions are probably the same questions that some of your colleagues have. So again, don't be shy. So let me share my screen really quickly. And I just want to show you when we talk to parents, when we talk to families, what we put in front of them right away, because I'm guessing you hear this, and I've heard it every year since I've been doing this for well over a decade, is parents saying, why do I need to submit these forms? I'm not going to get need-based aid. Sometimes that's true, but sometimes it's actually not true. They listen to their sister, their neighbor, and they didn't submit forms and they got money and I don't need to do this. And we at CAP, we recommend that every family hands down submits the FAFSA for sure. And really, almost all families should be submitting both forms if it's a school that requires the CSS profile. And there's a bunch of reasons, but in some of this, I'm sure you all know, but there are schools that require these forms to give out merit aid. So that's the non-need-based aid. Obviously, it doesn't make sense. And parents say, well, why would that be? It just is what it is. So if they don't want to leave money on the table, they need to submit it. There's also schools that if they don't submit those forms for freshman year, even if they're not eligible, they can never do it again. And I have worked with families and reached out to schools with them to say, hey, things have changed. And some of the schools that I've dealt with, they just don't budge. It's like, you didn't submit it freshman year, you're stuck. And I used to say all the time to parents, like, are you going to roll the dice that your life isn't going to change? And that was before COVID. And now with COVID, wow, that's a perfect example of one day it was like this, the next day we all had to stay, couldn't go out, right? And businesses closed, or they let employees didn't have a job, right? Lost income. So things can change. So I'm just suggesting that you really encourage parents. Like, I know it's stressful, I know it's a pain, but it's really important to do it. And I always tell parents, friends and family are lovely, but when it comes to paying for college, please don't listen to them, because unless you're going to sit down and say, so let's compare tax returns and let's look at our assets, I'm being facetious, right? Nobody's going to do that. You really shouldn't take advice from other people, because you don't know their situation. You don't really know their student and their profile to take that advice. So they should be submitting these forms. So this is what we show them, because the other thing is, a lot of times parents, they don't understand anything about this process. So the student aid index used to be the EFC, as we all know, right? I've gone through this process with parents, and we're at the end, like they're figuring out how to pay once they've made the decision. And I talk about their EFC, in the past, and they say, what's that? So they didn't even know. Don't understand this, they're just drifting. And in my mind, then the colleges have all the leverage, right? They've got buyers and consumers who are not informed. And so that's really what we're trying to do. We're trying to educate parents. We're trying to help you lean on us to educate parents. So your internet is cutting in and out. Oh, okay. All right. Well, hopefully, I don't know, there's not much I can do about that. So hopefully that's not going to continue. Hold on one second. Okay, well, hopefully that's gonna get better. It's not, our weather isn't super bad. But hopefully, and I hope, Jennifer, that it's not just you, but I kind of hope it is, but it's better. Okay, great. Thank you so much. Hopefully that won't happen again. So I apologize for that. We've got some rain where I am. I'm outside of Seattle, but it shouldn't be affecting it. So hopefully that was just a one-off. All right, so let me share my screen and let's just talk a little bit for a few minutes. I just want to share a few slides, and please put in questions as I'm doing this if they come up. So we all know this, right? But this is the first thing we tell parents, like, all these schools are discounting, and they're doing it in one of three ways: the grants, the scholarships, and the self-help. And then the next thing that we show them is, this is the equation that this all works around. And this SAI is the fundamental part of it. So if you don't submit financial aid forms, the colleges have no idea and they can't figure out need. And like I said before, even if they have $100,000 SAI, and I've seen it many times, still important to have those forms in. So what I want to do now is just go in and give you a visual of the CSS profile. If you ever go in there, it's not much different than it was last year. So here's a dashboard for my sample family. And you've got the colleges here and they can add more. This is a divorced family, so you've got the non-custodial parent deal in there. But when you go into the application, this is very similar to last year. For people that got in here a couple of years ago, it was better in my opinion because they had a nice little column over here. You could navigate and easily go to sections. It's not like that. It changed last year and it's pretty similar. So when you go into a section, I've completed all this, so they're all showing up. The way to get to stuff is, unfortunately, all you can do is this. Click, 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 click till you get to where you need to go. And so it's not the greatest, but it is what it is, right? That's how they have it set up. There's some thought that maybe they were trying to be more mobile friendly. So that's how the CSS kind of shows up for families. They go in through their kids' college board login. Almost all kids have that because of the PSAT and SAT, if nothing else. So let me go back to my deck and I want to show you some pages, like I said earlier, in the CSS that always cause questions from parents always have questions. And I also want to share some of our strategies around this. Okay. So first off, if you don't know, and this was a great change that came up last year, is if family has an adjusted gross income of less than 100,000, all the fees are waived. And the first school is 25 because there's a registration fee in there, and subsequent schools are 16. So that's great. That's an awesome change. Or if they can click on any of these, then they're going to have it waived, and they'll get a pop-up when they hit save and continue that tells them that when they get to the end, all their schools will be listed, but it'll say 0. So they don't have to put in a credit card. They don't have to pay. And we do have a question. So do college students need to complete the CSS each year? Most likely, yes. It's a school by school decision, but in my experience, most schools do if they are not receiving any aid. Oh, okay. Sorry, I didn't read the end of your question. If they submitted freshman year, they didn't receive any aid. In that case, probably not, right? If they have a very high SAI and they receive merit aid or no aid at all, and they're what I call full pay, then probably not. They can reach out to the school, but for most schools, what I've noticed is what I was mentioning earlier is as long as they submit for freshman year, then they're good to go. But if they're worried about it, the best thing to do is always just call the school. Just call the school and ask them. Just get that answer, because we never want families to leave money on the table. But in general, I would say no. They do it for freshman year, they're probably good. Seems like not all schools that need CSS are requiring both households to fill out the CSS if divorced. How can parents figure that out? You're right. So with the CSS profile, there is what's called a non-custodial CSS profile, and not all schools require that. And you're right, there have been more schools lately that have been joining the ranks to say they're not looking at the non-custodial parent. Sorry, I got something in my throat. A good place to start. Got a piece of ice in my mouth there. A good place to start is if you go look at the CSS profile participating colleges. And if you Google that, it'll be your first link. And I can show you this in a minute. I'll go back and show you. And just remind me if I forget when I get out of here. But it will list all the schools that require the CSS profile, and there'll be a column that says non-custodial CSS profile, and it'll say yes or no. That's a great starting point. If you see that it says no there, that typically means that the school is not looking at the non-custodial parent, but it's not an absolute. There are some schools that don't use the College Board, the CSS Profile non-custodial, but they have their own form. So it's always important, and don't quote me on this because it's been a couple of years, but a couple of years ago, Oberlin fell in that category. They say no on that link online, College Board's link, but they do have their own form. So most of the time the school is going to reach out and say, hey, you're divorced, you submitted the CSS, you're going to need to do it, but you want to cover all your bases. So that's a great place to start. And I'll go show you that in a few minutes, but that's a good question. Okay, do parents have a separate account for the student? I heard you were talking about parents logging in through the student's account, but I wasn't clear if that was the only way, the best way. So the way that you start the CSS profile is, they go to, I think it's CSS Profile. I don't know the exact link, but if you Google CSS Profile application, it's going to be the first link there. I think it's cssprofile.collegeboard.org. You click on 2425, it's going to ask for the student login, email, and password. And so that's how you're doing it. This is completely different than the FAFSA. You're logging, the parents are logging in with their student through their College Board login. That's the way to get in. It's not the preferred way, it's the way. So that's the only way to get in. And I might have clicked, hold on. Oh, okay. I got that to students. Okay. I thought I clicked on one and put it in completed that I didn't answer. For divorced families, the 100,000 fee waiver AGI of one household or the custodial? No, it's the parent that's submitting it. If they're divorced, that's the custodial parent with the student. It's that person's AGI. So they put that in and it's going to say, 89,000, hey, you got the fee waiver. So it's just the parent that's submitting it. If they're married, then it's the total household. How do you get a list of colleges that require the CSS profile? So I will say, and I'm going to go in right now because obviously this is a burning question. So I'm going to go in and show you this list online. The other thing I want to share, and I will go into, I'll show you the software that we have available. We have that in there. Does the school require the CSS profile? And then we also are gathering all the data around the non-custodial parent. So I'm going to, I'll share about that in a few minutes. So let me share my screen again and show you this just so, because everybody's asking. So let me show you. So all I did was Google CSS profile participating institutions. So you see all the schools here and you see the labels up here. So here's the CSS. First of all, this will, if they're on the list, you can look down. They require the CSS profile for domestic students. You can go down and see. What's cool in here is you can organize it by what you want to see, yes versus no. So here's the CSS non-custodial parent. So you can go here and say, I want to see all the ones that don't require that, and it'll show you. So there you go. So here's all the no's. So again, as I said, that probably means that they don't look at the non-custodial parent, but please tell the family to reach out to make sure, if you're working with them, to reach out just to be 100% sure, because they could be using their own form, but most of them are not. Most of them are not, but you never know. So we just better safe than sorry, right? Okay, so let me go back to a slide here. And let's see, do we have a couple other? Okay, so I answered that. Thanks for this. I have to step away in 10 minutes. Yep, there will be a recording, will be sent out. So you're all good if you need to step away or you get distracted. Don't worry about that. We will send out a recording. All right, so let's keep going here and let's look at a few other. This is more of a cap, what we recommend as far as tips and tricks to fill out this form. So you will notice in there that they will mark a question as required, and it'll just be right after the question in parentheses, it'll say required. So if it's required, they have to fill it in, obviously. If it's not required, our guidance is leave it blank, or if you need to put something to move on, which you don't on the not requireds, just don't answer it. And it's not to be dishonest, because really my talk track around these forms to parents is three different things, kind of like the three commandments, if you will. First and foremost, be honest. Secondly, don't overestimate. And thirdly, don't overshare, right? So after parents submit these forms, as most of you probably know, they're going to get reached out to you and say, okay, now we need your tax returns and your W-2s and all your financial information. You're going to securely upload it to us. And the reason why they ask for that is because they're going to go through and look at tax returns and look at businesses and look at what you submitted and your forms. If you made a mistake on something, on your adjusted gross income, they're definitely going to update that. But they're looking for a lot of things when they do that. But my point is, you're not trying to hide or be dishonest, but it makes it easier for parents to fill out the forms. And if it's not required, just don't answer it. That's how we guide our families through this. There are some parents that just aren't comfortable with that. If they're not, it's their form. They should submit it as they want. But most people appreciate the guidance and they follow what we're suggesting. The other thing is there's a lot of these, the second question here on the CSS, where it says yes or no. And this is not a required question. The minute the parent clicks on one of these, you've got to click on one. So I always tell parents, if you're not going to answer it, don't click no and say, oh, now I want to release the no. All you can do is toggle between them at that point. So that's a nice little tidbit to share with people. When it comes to this, not oversharing and not answering questions that are not required, they do ask for the parent's social security number. And I always tell parents, don't put it here. It's not required. They're going to see it when parents upload their tax returns, but why put it in another place? It's not required. Now, I will say they ask it for the student, and I don't remember if it's required or not, but it's a little different because there are some schools that track the CSS with the other stuff that's coming in for the student by that social security number. So we have had instances where schools will reach out and say, we didn't get your CSS. And so it requires some legwork for them to go find it, even though it was submitted. So that the student social is a little different, but my opinion, the parent social with everything, all the identity theft and craziness that goes on, again, don't share it. It's not going to affect your financial aid. The other thing they ask, and this is a definite not share, is what's the highest level of the parent's education? So they see, master's, PhD, and they're starting to form opinions about the family. So don't share information that you don't need to. That's the upshot here. This sort of stuff, taxes, AGI, what you earn from work, this is required. They need to go do it, and they can click on, I've clicked on it, these hints. Sometimes the hints are super helpful. So parents should click on that and see and make sure they're following what it says. This line 22 on the tax return, a couple lines down, there's a total tax, and parents are always like, I don't want to put 22, Peg, I want to put 24. It's a bigger number. They should follow the instructions, because line 24 is already being accounted for elsewhere. There's calculations in the background. So just follow the instructions. So here, I've got these stars here because I want to point out, we all know about these upcoming FAFSA changes. So don't make the assumption that the CSS profile is just following suit and everything that legislation says they're doing, because they are not. Sometimes they're aligned and sometimes they're not. So if you look here where they're asking for tax deferred, pre-tax, it just basically means pre-tax savings. 401k, 403b. A lot of you have a 403b at work, I assume. You might be voluntarily putting some money in there, not your pension, but a 403b. That is no longer going to be added back on the FAFSA, which is wonderful for families, but the CSS profile is still including it. So they're not following suit. So just keep that in mind. Alimony doesn't show up on your tax return. They are asking about it, right? And also you see over here, housing food allowance for the military, for clergy. That is not going to be an add back on the FAFSA only schools and that FMSAI calculation, but the CSS profile schools are still asking about it. So those are situations where the CSS could have a higher SAI because if a family has all this, it's going to be included in the calculation. Another biggie is untaxed income. So you see here like workman's comp, untaxed disability, money provided. Things that are not taxed by Uncle Sam have always been added back in for both forms. The FAFSA is no longer doing that, which is huge for families, but the CSS is still asking about it. And all these things can be talked about on appeal for sure. But I just want to, stress the point that if you get all dialed in, okay, all these changes on the FAFSA doesn't mean they're going to show up on the CSS profile because a bunch of them are not. This is an example, and the CSS has done this forever, ever since I've been doing that, where the prior year, so for kids that are doing these forms, now it's 2022, that's what they're basing the calculation on. But they still ask for, hey, what do you think it's going to look like at the end of this year, 2023? And can you tell us what you think it's going to be next year? Not part of the calculation. So I tell people, like I said earlier, if it's not required, don't fill it out. If it is required, be honest, but don't overestimate, don't put, well, I think I might get a giant bonus at the end of 2023 this year. If you don't know that for sure, don't put that if you're answering a question that's required, like some of these questions are over here. Again, be honest, but they shouldn't overestimate because this isn't part of the calculation, but it all feeds into how that financial aid office is looking at this family and how much money they might give them. So this is a big one, and I captured the questions that come up to this. They ask about the parent. It's not required. Don't answer it. They ask about the parent. Are you participating in any of these? Not required, so don't check it. But this is a new thing as of last year, and none of us are happy about it at CAP. They are now asking for the balance in retirement accounts. So this means 401k, 403b, Roth IRAs, traditional IRAs. This is not part of the calculation. They're only supposed to be using non-retirement assets when they calculate that institutional SAI. But it is what it is. It's a required question and they ask. Now, if parents have not saved, if that question I showed previously that said, what's your pre-tax retirement contributions? If they just happen to not do that, and I've had a few families I've worked with, they're not making enough money or, hard times, they're just not saving for that prior year. If you put 0 there, what we're finding is this question does not pop up, which is kind of funny because it doesn't mean they don't have money in retirement, but I'm glad because that at least those families don't get this question. But the lion's share of families, if they put 5,000 in a 401k, they're going to see this question. So they need to answer it. It's a required question. That's all I can say. We have been told by some of our experts that actually work at some of these schools, MIT, and we have an expert who's the past head of financial aid at Southern Cal. If the parents have not been able to save a lot for retirement, that can actually help a financial aid package because they're looking at what's their income, what's their non-retirement money, and how prepared are they for retirement. So if parents are in their 60s and have 100,000 in retirement accounts, they're not really prepared on that part. So that actually might help. So there are instances where it can help. But it's just, like I said, it is what it is. Doesn't pop up if they didn't save for retirement. So here's an example. I showed you examples where the CSS is not following the FAFSA changes, but here's an example where they are. So as we know, and we had questions about this already, that both parents are typically submitting this and the custodial parent submits it. The definition of custodial parent is going to follow the new definition that the FAFSA created, which is the parent that provides the most financial support on a year look back from when you're submitting the form. That's exactly what the FAFSA is. So it's no longer where the child spent the most nights sleeping like it used to be. So just keep that in mind. It is following the definition of the FAFSA. And this is an example where there's a planning opportunity for families. Again, they want to be honest, but if they're 50-50 on financial support, if they can come together and amicably have discussions about who should be the custodial parent, because if it is a school, like we talked about earlier, that doesn't look at the non-custodial parent, it's better for the parent that that's better for financial aid to submit this form. And they're going to have to figure it out for the FAFSA anyway. So obviously these will be aligned between the two forms. So when the FAFSA comes out, they'll already know who the custodial parent is, and that's the parent that's going to be submitting it. So for divorced and separated, which is my sample family here, you're going to get certain questions that won't pop up if you say married and married filing jointly. So again, answer the required questions, but they ask about the X. Bill is the X in my example here. And I tell parents, like, just don't touch this. Let your X answer questions for him or her. Leave that alone. If you're not talking all the time, how do you really know if they changed jobs or they got a promotion or whatever? So, and there's also a question, what is the other biological parent going to contribute? So I personally tell people, don't touch this one with the 10-foot pole. They're going to be telling the college this, let them do it, even though these are required questions. Because really, if you put a big number and that's not accurate, that could hurt, not you, but you know what I'm saying, the parents and the student, that could hurt a financial aid package. Now, here's a question that hands down every parent asks. And so I wanted to put this out there. They say, how much does PEG, and PEG is the student here, expect the parents to pay for that school year, the 24-25 school year? So this is a question that's required, so they got to answer it. It's not going to help you whatever you put, but it can definitely hurt a family. So what I tell people is you have to have good estimates of your SAI, and you don't want to put a number higher than the projected SAI, because the college will say, oh, we think they can afford 20,000, and the parents put 30, so now they can afford 30 because that's what they told us. So they've got to be really careful. For a lot of families, if they have a 529, they can divide it by 4, as long as that number stays under the SAI. That's the guidance we give, but they just want to be really careful because the colleges will just take that as the new number if they put a very high number. And I know some people get afraid, well, what if I put a low number, PEG? And what about, is that going to hurt things? They should just be honest. They should just be honest, just like applying for financial aid. You need to apply for financial aid, just be honest about it. Okay, and then here's a few. I covered a bunch of these, and then we'll be done with my slides here. And I see we've got some more questions that I want to answer. Again, they shouldn't feel obligated to answer questions that aren't required. Don't overvalue their property if they have a primary home that they own and other real estate. It's the value of that home. Like, I needed to sell it yesterday value, like quick sale value. And they can take off 15 or 20%. It's called the IRS quick sale. And we're going to go, I'm going to share a link. We've actually got a Zoom webinar coming up next week that we would love for you to invite your parents. We're going to get in your families. We're going to get in the weeds on all this stuff. Talking about 529s, don't overstate what you paid for college, don't overestimate. Yeah, and there's a special circumstances section in the, I'm going to stop share here, in the CSS. And that's the other thing that we recommend is, parents would love to write all their stuff and what's going on. And we tell them, hold off, because submit the required information, get your award. Then you can reach out and say, hey, thanks very much for the aid package you gave me. I need to share some information. So the families, it has a bit more, not a bit, they have more leverage there. Because if they share everything in the CSS and then they reach out and say, hey, but I told you I lost my job or I'm retiring, they say, oh, we took that into account. And then you don't really have a lot to go there unless you've got a competing offer, you've got competing schools offer or whatever. So we really recommend holding off on that and then definitely sharing it if there's a change in circumstance for sure, but holding off. So let me look here at our questions. Is there a specific deadline? Every school has their own deadline. And thanks for bringing that up. Deadlines are super important if you're eligible for need-based aid. You miss a deadline. I had a mom who came to me. I had not met her before. She is a junior at Southern Cal, and she said, my son's package is so much less than last year. And I was digging into it with her, but I asked our expert who's on JP, just because he used to be at Southern Cal, and the first thing he said to me is, did they miss the deadline, the priority financial aid deadline? And because that could be it right there, that they're getting 10,000 less or whatever, because then they're in the second bucket. So each school has their own priority deadlines, and it meshes with how they're applying for admission. So if it's EA, there's a deadline. If it's ED, there's a deadline. If there's regular, there's a deadline. So really looking on the website is the best place to go. One of my students' moms receives $500 a month in good faith from her ex, but it's not official child support or alimony. Should that be included in the other income? Technically, if she gets it every month, yeah, I mean, it should be included. Again, you want to be honest. If it's touch and go and it doesn't always happen, then I would say no. Or no, because it's not officially listed anywhere. This is where parents have to decide. As a professional, I have to tell people to be honest, right? It's their form. People ask me all the time, how do they know what my assets are? They don't really totally know, but I'm never going to tell people, well, just cut them in half, it's just the way that I roll. You should be honest. It must just show consistently in a bank account statement. Yeah, colleges, in my experience, it's pretty rare they ask for statements around stuff. They will look at your tax return pretty closely. So if somebody's saying they don't have a lot of assets, but they've got a lot of dividends or interest, that's going to be a red flag, right? And they're going to reach out and say, did you forget something? They want to submit the forms honestly, but I understand your question. It's not official child support. And child support is now considered an asset on the FAFSA, which is better. The CSS schools haven't really come out and said how they're going to look at that. So that's the reason I'm asking. It's probably good. If they're going to look at it as income still, it's probably better to be disclosed the other way. Does the parent who claims a student as a dependent get looked at in a divorce situation? So basically, it's that definition that I said. The custodial parent is going to submit that form for the CSS profile, and it's the parent that provided the most financial support. Okay, if that's the one that's claimed on the tax return, so be it. If it's not, it's not. If the one parent who provides the most financial is not the one who claims the child in that year, yeah, that should not flag anything. I will just say this is the first year we're going through this on the FAFSA side, so I can't say for sure, but that's the definition. It's the parent that provides the most financial support, and then the language is, if it truly is 50-50, which, as I said before, I tell parents, well, just make it not 50-50. Pay $50 more for soccer or whatever, if that's what makes sense for you to be the custodial parent. And this is more on the FAFSA side, where only one parent's financials are looked at. That's how they're telling us it works. The fallback is whoever makes more money, but I don't think that should ever really come into play. So it shouldn't be dependent on who's claiming that child as a dependent. Because I know a lot of divorced families, it's part of their agreement and they flip back and forth. on that from year to year. What is a 529? A 529 is a college savings account. It's an IRS sort of vehicle, and families can save. Typically a parent or grandparent's the owner, the student is a beneficiary, and basically it's tax deferred growth on the money that's in there for the life of the account. And then when it's taken out for qualified education expenses, which is defined by the IRS, you never pay tax on those earnings. So it's really nice if a family can afford to start saving when their child's in kindergarten or something. It's really nice. So I think I was told once that it had to be court ordered. I'm not totally sure what you're referencing there. Will the SAI determined by the FAFSA be the same as an SAI calculated today? Honestly, on the FAFSA's site. I think you're talking about the FAFSA estimator or whatever they're calling it. That's supposed to be a guide. I would not, until you actually go through the official FAFSA, because I've been on all the webinars through the summer, and they talked about different things, and now we're hearing murmurings that they're changing some of it. So not necessarily. That's their estimator. I'm sure if you read the fine print, it says it's an unofficial SAI. So, all right. So I got all the questions. I want to take a few minutes and talk about, again, this is a way that we support all of you. And there's another way that we do this that some of you might be familiar with, and you might already be doing it, but we have like kind of a two-pronged approach for helping high schools and counselors and school districts. We have education, and then we also have our software, which I'll show you in a minute, because you were asking about how do we know if a school requires the CSS? We've got that in our software. So the education I want to touch on first. So we have a 5-part webinar series that you can see up here. And it's actually 6 parts now because we're breaking the second one into 2. But what we've found, and I found this through the years when I had my own company, is it is so overwhelming to parents that it's important to educate them along the journey, not just do a great presentation that covers everything from how do you know what your SAI is to how do you borrow. It's just too much for parents to digest. And what I found is they just get paralyzed. They don't know what to do. They walk away saying, that was so much great information, but they don't know next steps. They don't know what to do. So we've broken it down into basically the steps in the journey. We've got financial aid and scholarships, and we're hitting the FAFSA changes really hard until that comes to fruition. And that can be in the fall, can be in the spring. We like to spring for juniors and sophomores. We love to do. Then we go into, okay, financial aid forms are live, FAFSA and CSS. And that's what we're doing next week. And I'll put let me go grab the link, and I'm going to put it in the chat right now. This is a link that you can share with your families, and would love it if you would. It's what I just did with you all, but way more in depth. I've got way more screenshots. I'm gonna really get them schooled up. Oh, sorry, I just stopped my share here. Get them schooled up on how to submit the CSS profile. So grab that link that I just put in the chat. But anyway, so that's next week. But the CSS and the FAFSA, those will be separate this year. That's a one-off because of the FAFSA being delayed. Then after that's all done, we come in and say, okay, what happens after you submit the forms? IDOC, verification, private scholarships, where do they fit? Because parents are kind of obsessed with private scholarships, even though it's a small part of the money that really comes to families. It's really the college endowments that they want to grab. Then you're getting financial aid award letters, you're getting in, how do you appeal? And all that part of it. We give tips and tricks, really get in the weeds. And then, all right, you're close, you've made your decision. Now, how are you going to do this? You might have 529s or other savings, or grandma wants to help, or we do need some loans. How does that work? So we basically walked them through the whole process. So for the schools that we partner with, we're happy to do this education series. And then coupled with that, we have software. And so I want to take a minute and just show you our software that we've created specifically let me move my Zoom stuff up here, for families. So this is our dashboard, and they can plug in schools. We tell them their SAIs. And as I said before, everybody, people were asking that question. If I go into Chapman here and they go up here, they can see it's a federal school. So that tells them no CSS profile. So that information is in here, and we're actually building in, do they require the non-custodial parent if it's a CSS school like a Northwestern and a Stanford? We also have built in here how they look at primary home equity, because the CSS schools, which I'm sure a lot of you know, they vary on how they look at it. A Stanford looks at none of the primary home equity, whereas a Northwestern looks at a lot more of it. And you see here, we have a range on our institutional SAI for that exact reason. So we're building in, getting more detailed, more transparency for parents. And then we show them affordability. Well, you've got your 1 year. What does it look like over 4 years? And how much can you afford? And what's that difference? And what does that mean for loans? We really, just like the webinar series, we're taking them through the whole process. And I'm not going to go through all of this with you, but they can upload award letters. And when it gets to be that time when they're seniors, we'll translate them. We'll tell them should they appeal and why should they appeal. So this resource is part of how we partner. And some school districts have a budget, and they're like, yes, we'd like to provide licenses to our families. But to be totally transparent, a lot of school districts are like, this is lovely. This is wonderful. We just don't have a budget. And that's okay. That's okay. We have a free version of the software that all your families can get into. And if you have kids that are on free and reduced lunch, we comp them to what we call premium to have all the bells and whistles, no questions asked, and they can have that license so they're not left behind. The other parents can upgrade if they choose to, but they can go in there, get that dashboard, put in their 3 schools, see their SAIs. All of that is part of the free version. They can go in and change numbers in their profile, see how that affects their SAI. If they need to buy a new car, what if I buy that car? How does that affect my SAI? They can do all that stuff in there. So it's super powerful. If you do have a budget, then we start at about 2,000 a year to get the licenses. Then we'll actually do the webinar series just for your school or just for your district. But if you don't have a budget, again, it's all good. We're more than happy to support you and do the webinars, keep you posted when we're presenting them, give you promo copies. All you need to do is cut and paste and invite your families. And then they'll be educated on each step of the process. And then they can use this software hand in hand to learn about how everything works. But then real time during our webinars, I tell them, if you have your account set up, I'm teaching you about an SAI, look at your SAI. So it's super powerful. And as I said earlier, it informs them, right? They're an informed consumer. They're better able to ask the colleges questions when they go on visits. That's our mission at College A Pros, to end the student debt crisis by empowering families to shop smarter for college. And that happens by them being more educated. And I know a lot of schools will have a financial aid night, and you'll have a local school. I'm out here in Seattle, a school will come and share about the FAFSA. And as I said earlier, the presentations are great, but it's one time and it doesn't hit all the steps in the process. So the parents are kind of left saying, yeah, I don't know what to do now. And what I find with parents in this part of the process is they like to bury their head in the sand because it's scary and it's their kids and it's their money. And then what ends up happening is senior year, they have to start addressing it. And sometimes they already have the list done and they've already applied to schools. And that's what we're really trying to help. So we're here to show up. I had 2 kids in school. I have twins. They graduated. I couldn't believe how much work the counselors had on their plate. It was crazy. And so we want you to lean on us. We want to support your school, whatever's best for you. So a great next step is to talk to my colleagues. I'm going to put his scheduling link in the chat. Please, please, please reach out to him or use this link, sign up. He would love to talk to you, hear more about your school. Do you have a budget? If you don't, how we can show up for you and add a lot of value for you as well as for your families. And we have a dedicated email for all of you, and that's counselor@collegeaidpro.com. So counselor@collegeaidpro.com. Please utilize that. If you have a question, just shoot us an email. We have a great support desk. Anne Marie runs our support. She is top notch, very intentional. We do our best to respond as quickly as possible. So your message will not fall on deaf ears. And if we don't know the answer or we need to do some research, we'll show up and we'll definitely want to support you. So let me see here. We've got a few more questions. If you do you complete the FAFSA, how do you know your SAI not to overestimate on the profile, which you said not to do? Well, I didn't pay this person to write this question, but set up if the parents have a MyCap account, they've set up their CAP software and they've put in their profile accurate information about their income and assets, you'll have estimates of your SAI. That's a great place to get it from us. That's what we do. We're basically a supercharged net price calculator for all different schools, and we're building in and constantly tweaking based on what their financial aid policies are at the different schools. The 529 is in a different, I think you meant different sibling's name. Does it need to be reported on the current student's CSS? So right now it is, yes. That's a difference between the CSS and the FAFSA. The FAFSA, as of this summer, was saying only report the 529 for the student that's applying for financial aid. The CSS says 529, so it's asking for all of them. There's been some murmurings that they might change that on the FAFSA side. I'm waiting until we hear officially what's going on. But yes, for the CSS, you're going to include those. But I will say, and I've done this in the past, and sometimes it's been successful, sometimes not. Like I just met with a mom the other day, and she has triplets, God bless her. And she has $185,000 in each 529. So she's been fortunate to save a lot of money. So that's a big chunk for the other two kids that aren't the student on that CSS. And I would tell her, if that's going to help her get more need-based aid, appeal it after the fact and say, hey, these are earmarked. I can send you a statement showing you the registration on the account. Please pull these out of the calculation. So all of these things can be talked about with the colleges on appeal. But that's the straightforward answer. How do you fill out the CSS question? How much parents expect to pay? So I covered that on the slide. So maybe you came in late, or maybe you put in this question before I did it. Using the SAI if you want to complete, but SAI won't be available till December, January. So have your families set up a CAP account. You're going to see an estimate of the IM SAI and the FM, and there could be a considerable difference between the two. Honestly, most families, if they have any savings and they divide it by 4, it's not more than their SAI, because SAIs are huge, right? Most parents can't believe how high their SAI and in the past EFCs were, because their income is a huge part of it after allowances, assessed at almost 47%. So honestly, most of the time for most families, they don't have savings that's going to surpass their SAI. But if they want an estimate, they can use CAP. There's other estimators out there as well. Of course, I love CAP. It's my company, and we're very proud of what we've produced to help families. They can get in there for free and see their FMSAI and their IM, but there's also other estimators out there if they want to go that route. You don't want to wait to fill out forms to know your SAI. That's all part of the planning. Sophomore parents want to know their SAI so they can start figuring things out around affordability. Definitely don't want to be waiting until you submit that FAFSA. And the CSS schools won't tell you your SAI. They will give out a financial aid award letter, but the SAI isn't on there. The FAFSA, up through last year, when you hit submit, you saw your EFC on the confirmation page. I'm assuming that they're going to continue to do that with the SAI. Some parents honestly miss it. They don't even realize it's on there. So anyway, so that's know your SAI. And it's a question that parents always have, but like I said, most parents, they don't overestimate because they don't have nearly as much money as what the colleges they can afford. But just on those few instances where they do, they just don't want to overestimate. So hopefully that helps. I've got all the questions done and we've got 4 minutes to spare. So please, we would love to talk to you about how we can support you, budget or not. We'd love to be presenting to your families. That's all I do. I love presenting. I'm the director of education. So lean on us. Let us help you. Book a meeting with my colleague, Matt Carpenter, and he's happy to chat with you. I don't see any other questions coming in. So I know everybody's busy. So I'm going to let everybody go. Have a great rest of the day and a great week. And we will see you next time. Take care.